Hello and welcome in. It's Sunday, November 24th, and we appreciate you being here. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and it's Always College Football, our Sunday quick takeaways edition of Always College Football before we kind of dive into the weeds a little later today, and we'll come back tomorrow and clean up and tie up some of the loose ends from the show today. Wild day yesterday in college football. Very, very wild from start to finish. Just when you thought things were going to get pretty crazy, it's like they were made even more crazy by the outcomes of games that were to come later in the day. We'll start at the top. Ohio State and Indiana. That was the big game of the day. Indiana, top 5 team, came out of the gates like gangbusters. Very impressive opening drive, but that was about it. If you look at how this game went, and it wasn't, I think a lot of people have kind of jumped to this conclusion that, oh, well, it's clearly Indiana is not, a real team. They're not this, they're not that. If there's one takeaway in the game, it's that you look at Ohio State and what Ohio State's capable of in this game. I think there's been a little bit too much focus on Indiana and their candidacy and all this other stuff. No. Ohio State is a legitimate national championship contender. Let's focus on what they just did yesterday. Let's focus on what they did defensively, because it was about as good of a performance as one could possibly imagine. It has held one of the best and most efficient offenses in the country to 153 total yards. It was a complete and utter beatdown. Super impressed by that defense all season long, but I thought they saved their best for this performance. I thought there were many, many things that Indiana could potentially do to make life difficult on Ohio State's defense. I thought Indiana has really good weapons on the perimeter. I feel like Indiana's got a pretty interesting rushing attack. I thought Indiana could kind of beat them with timing and accuracy and stuff like that. It wasn't that at all. And I got to dive a little deeper because this game was on while we were on. I did have it in the quad box, so I watched the whole game, but I didn't get to hear anything in the game. And I also didn't get to watch kind of the nuance and the game tape. So I'll watch that today. Check back tomorrow with more takeaways from that. But if there is one takeaway for me, is not that Indiana is not worthy. It's that Ohio State is rounding into shape the way we anticipated them rounding into shape this season. We picked them to win the national championship. That team that played yesterday can certainly do that. And it might be the first time we've seen them rev their engine like that in a while. So super impressed with what I saw from them defensively. I still think there's a few things to clean up offensively. Let's just be real. Offensively, they were gift wrapped a couple of very beneficial situations. Great field position on a few different cases. But I really think that the offense, there's a little more in the tank there. I just want to dive in so I can watch why it doesn't seem to be clicking as much as I want it to be clicking. Like I said, anytime you have a performance from your quarterback where you're 22 of 26, 201, super efficient, I can live with that. I just think there might be even more in the tank, which should be scary for other teams, especially when they figure out how to create a little bit more complexity in the run game. Very interested to watch that game. Can't wait to do it. Check back with me tomorrow. Our 10 takeaways. I'm sure one of them will be about Ohio State, their defense, their offense, and their all-around performance. Indiana, I think if you were to ask me in the immediacy after the game, would they have been a college football playoff contender? I still think they are. I know that it's kind of low-hanging fruit, and I know it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And with what happened after the fact, with Bama losing, with Ole Miss losing, that changes things a little bit. I think Indiana is very safe at the moment. But even if Alabama had won and Ole Miss had won, I still feel pretty good about Indiana. I watched them this year. I know the strength of schedule is not great. I know the strength of schedule is actually, when I say not great, it's terrible. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, you can't put lipstick on a pig. The strength of schedule is atrocious, but the level of dominance is something that is admirable. So I still think they're in a really good spot, but they got a lot to clean up. And I think they found out just how far away they actually are yesterday with the performance from their offense. Let's go next to the other big games, big upsets. Alabama, we'll start there. I had told you last week, and we had kind of discussed this now for a while about Alabama. Alabama has become this season way too much of a quarterback-driven team. And that has been trending in this direction. And we had talked a little bit about this last week, saying the thing that scares you most about Alabama is that if Jalen Milroe is on, they are so tough to play against. When he's on and he's got his A game, man, they are a beast. But when he is not on, and there have been multiple games this year where he hasn't been, there's even been multiple halves this year where he hasn't been. When he's not on his game, it's a problem. And that's what happened yesterday. I mean, he played poorly in the game, did not make good decisions. We had told you, really, I thought the only pathway to victory for Oklahoma was if Alabama screwed it up. And Alabama yesterday very much screwed it up. Oklahoma deserves immense credit for making plays on the football, for picking off the passes that were thrown right to them. They absolutely deserve credit for that. They clearly flustered Jalen Milroe, and I thought their plan was really solid. The start was great, and this is another thing about Alabama. When they don't get off to a good start, they haven't been able to kind of flip the script a little bit. Man, it's really, this team has become too much about the quarterback. Great teams find a way to involve other players and involve other pieces to make sure that if one guy doesn't have his best stuff, all right, that's fine. The next guy will step up and, hey, this is going to be a running back game. Hey, this is going to be a wide receiver game. Hey, this is going to be a defensive line game. That hasn't really happened with regularity from Alabama this year. Milroe played poorly against Oklahoma. He really poorly against Oklahoma. Really poorly. He played poorly against Tennessee, and he played poorly at times. I still think he played pretty well against Vanderbilt, but the defense didn't have their best stuff that day. But he played poorly against South Carolina, and they almost got in that game as well. So it's unfortunate for Alabama. I think their playoff hopes are essentially done, need a lot of help. Can it happen? Absolutely. But they're going to need quite a bit of help. And we'll kind of go through that on Wednesday's show. We'll take a look at the pathways for certain teams and how they can get back in the mix of the 12-team playoffs. Because there's a few that now are going to be on the outside looking in, and not totally extinguished hopes, but highly unlikely without some considerable help. The one thing, too, I don't understand about the illegal touching, that the guy was covered up, and because illegal touching can be a lot of different things. A guy goes out of bounds and isn't forced out of bounds, doesn't reestablish himself in bounds, and touches the ball, first person to touch the ball. If a guy's covered up and is an ineligible receiver and they catch the ball, that can be illegal touching. I looked at the formation, I looked at all that, and I still am not 100% certain what the heck they called or why they called what they called. I don't get it. So I'm kind of anxious to see the response and the explanation there, because it doesn't make sense to me. It was pretty clear that Ryan Williams was not covered up. It was pretty clear that Ryan Williams was an eligible receiver, and I think that touchdown should have stood. Now, would it have made a difference? I don't know. It's fourth quarter. At that point, it's 24-10 if the touchdown stands, so maybe it doesn't matter, but still one that I think we need an explanation on, because it just was a terrible, terrible call based on all the looks that I saw. Maybe there's something I missed, but based on the looks that I saw, it didn't make a lot of sense. Ole Miss, another big upset in the game. This game, and we called this game, it felt so similar to the Ole Miss game against Kentucky, where there really were about 5 or 6 different ways that Ole Miss could have closed this game out. Ole Miss had 3 fourth and short stops with J.J. Pegues, who, by the way, coming into the game yesterday, was 12 for 12 on short yardage and goal line situations. 12 for 12. Yesterday, he was 3 for 6. And those 3 stops were massive because they were in the red zone in some cases, and they led to sudden change. It allowed Florida to get off the field. Red zone was a huge problem for Ole Miss yesterday. They were 0 for 3 in the red zone, and then Jackson Dart at the end of the game, I don't know what he was thinking. Way too aggressive, trying to push downfield when it wasn't there to be pushed. There were multiple defensive players that were staying on top of the defense, and he's trying to throw it over their heads when they wouldn't allow him to throw it over their heads. It was just a really, really disappointing performance for Ole Miss. I can't sum it up. I've been on the call for 4 of their games. I've been on the call for their highest moment against Georgia, and I've been on the call for all 3 of their losses this year. Those 3 losses all feel remarkably similar, where if you go and look at the tail of the tape, Ole Miss is the better team. They're more talented team, but situational football, 4th down, 3rd down, and red zone has been Ole Miss's undoing now 3 times against LSU, against Kentucky, and then yesterday against Florida. But on the other side, Florida, you got to be proud of what Billy Napier has built. This is a physical football team. This is a pretty disruptive football team along both lines of scrimmage. They got a star in DJ Lagway, who didn't have to do a ton yesterday, but there were 2 or 3 throws that he made in the game that were off the charts good, with defenders draped all over him, somehow just all arm being able to deliver the football. It's amazing. It really is amazing to watch that young man, and he's going to be really special. I mean, in time, he's going to be big time. It certainly feels like it's trending in that direction, but he's already a guy that can captivate the entire audience, the entire stadium, the entire defense. Everybody is elevated by his presence, and there's not a lot of guys that have that type of effect on the team. It really was amazing. The teams that will benefit most from what transpired with Ole Miss and Alabama yesterday, SMU now is in the position that even if they don't win the ACC championship game, they punched their ticket yesterday. Even if they don't win the ACC championship game, can they get in as an 11-2 ACC runner-up? They're now in position to get in as an at-large, even if they don't win their conference. So that's fascinating. Obviously, we know Miami, similar situation. If they're 11-2, lose the ACC championship game, are they in? Is Clemson alive? Or does Alabama or one of these teams kind of drop below Clemson? How far do these teams fall? There's a lot of things we're going to have to unpack this week for sure. You look at the Big 12, and the Big 12 is, I think, they were in a position to potentially be benefited from yesterday's outcomes, but it not going to happen now. Not with BYU losing, not with Colorado losing. Now, Kansas is the biggest spoiler in the country right now. They have beaten 3 consecutive ranked teams in the Big 12. Iowa State, they got things started against them. Then it started the next week where they knocked off BYU, and now they just put a bow on Colorado's season as well. Devin Neal, and we had told you last week in the previews, man, our previews were nails last week. I feel really good about it. Everything we told you that needed to happen, it was like, whoa, this is crazy. Anyways, felt good about it. Looking at this game, we basically said Colorado's got to stop the run, right? That's the key. They got to stop the run. If they can't stop the run, they're in significant trouble. And that's exactly what happened. Devin Neal, the outstanding running back, has been there forever, has done a great job for Kansas forever, goes for 207 and 37 carries and 3 touchdowns. Just complete bully ball. And that's one thing, too, that we had thought that Colorado had made growth in that area. We had thought this is a group that, hey, you're not going to just run it down their throat anymore. Last year, that was the path of least resistance. You could run it right at them, and they really had no answer. This year is a little different animal. And yesterday, they kind of reverted back to last year's version of Colorado with just how quickly they were getting pushed off the ball. Shedeur Sanders, I thought, had a solid outing. A solid outing, but there's only so much you can do when you have a defense that's giving up the yards and the carries the way they were giving it up. So credit to Kansas for getting their season back on track, and they now find themselves one game away from punching their ticket to bowl eligibility. Arizona State has been one of the best stories in the sport this year, and I just think people have been a little late to the party there, self-included. It's like, okay, how good are they? How good are they? And then it's like they just keep winning, and here we are now with them 2 games away from not just punching their ticket to the college football playoff, but winning a Big 12 championship. And you have got to give a tremendous amount of credit to what Kenny Dillingham's done. We know that their running back, Cam Scattaboo, is just amazing. Like, he's awesome. 28 carries, $147 in this game, 3 touchdowns. And the Sun Devils way out in front. I mean, just rocking BYU. The end of game situation was maybe the craziest thing I think I've seen. Had that game ended after they led 21-zip and 21-3 at halftime, and then we're in full control with the exception of a couple moments there in the second half. Had that game ended in BYU securing a Hail Mary to win the game because Arizona State kind of butchered the final sequence, that would have been an all-time bad beat. They didn't, but Arizona State's magical turnaround continues. 3-9 a year ago to now, they're within striking distance of the college football playoff. Just incredible. Iowa State, on the other hand, they have not won a conference championship in 112 years. And there was a moment, I feel like, in the game against Utah where it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to wait a little longer, right? We're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Missed field goal by Utah, and boom, they survive. This is an amazing, amazing story, I think, about Iowa State this year, because there have been moments in this season where Iowa State's looked really, really good. And then there's been moments where I'm kind of sitting there thinking to myself, it's like, ooh, I just don't know what I can expect. And they have a very difficult game coming up this weekend. If they beat Kansas State, I believe they're in the Big 12 title game. So they have a lot coming up this weekend, and we'll see how things go. We told you that Army was no match for Notre Dame. I've been saying this for weeks. People have said that you're not patriotic if you don't pull for Army. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you can love your country and acknowledge that Army's strength of schedule of 133 is going to be no match for a team that's playing as well as anybody in college football. I mean, right now, Notre Dame has been on absolute tear so far the last few weeks. And while you can look at the Virginia game and maybe nitpick and say, yeah, they didn't play great offensively and they were 1 for 12 on third down. And if not for Virginia's critical mistakes, maybe the game would have looked a little different. Like, sure, you can nitpick and that's fine. But if you really watch Notre Dame collectively and the comfort that they're starting to create with their quarterback, the 3-headed monster that they're in, that they have at running the football with the 2 backs and Riley Leonard, the defense that completely can sell out and take away the run, is a group in Army that had run it on everybody. And if you look at how they ran it against Notre Dame, I know the final numbers looked pretty good, right? It's like 205 rushing yards thereabouts, but most of it was down the stretch when the game was completely out of reach. So I think when you look at where Notre Dame's at, man, I think they're a very real national championship contender. Now, I will say that with a caveat, I think they could also lose next week. You know what I mean? Like, I think everybody, that USC team is dangerous. They're young. And while I know USC they just on the heels of a disappointing effort last night against UCLA, but would it surprise anybody if USC beat Notre Dame with their weapons next week? Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying that's just seemingly the way the college football season has gone this year. Just when you start to feel good about a team, they seemingly let you down. USC ended up winning the game, obviously, and pulling it off against UCLA, but it was not a very comfortable game up until the fourth quarter. So either way, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Huge game next week for Notre Dame. They win. They not only secure a playoff spot, but I think you can make the case now that they secured that home playoff game, which is obviously a massive coup for the Fighting Irish. Penn State survived a nail-biter. I thought this was a gutsy performance. You're in a hole down early in the ball game, and the way that they kind of put this game on ice was pretty tremendous. You have multiple 4th and short situations that they convert. I thought them rolling the dice, by the way, pretty impressive. They had a faked punt I mean, this was not easy at all for Penn State, but they found a way to win on the road against a good Minnesota team. I think Penn State, in my eyes, my level of respect for what they've now accomplished has gone up drastically. I know people will say Minnesota's not great, but it's a similar takeaway to me to what I saw from Oregon at Wisconsin. You know, having someone, in some cases, you're playing in an opponent's stadium on senior day. There's heightened emotions. Going and just surviving is all you need to do. And that's what Penn State did. I mean, it's getting to the point now. It's like, just win, baby. Like, just win and you'll be all right. And in some cases, you know, don't lose by a lot. Those are also things that kind of matter because, man, there's people dropping like flies here in the college football playoff mix. If you look at where things are right now in some of the power leagues, had I told you 3 weeks ago that the ACC was likely to get 2 teams in, what would you have said? Had I told you 3 weeks ago that the SEC might just get 3 teams in, what would you have said? If I told you that the ACC or the Big 12 champion 3 weeks ago was going to be Arizona State, what would you have said? Think about how much the college football world has flipped on its head here in the month of November. It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, teams are starting to peak, teams are starting to elevate, and some teams, man, that have been paper tigers, or maybe they're just not playing very well or getting got. It's been really wild to see. Nebraska is going bowling. Felt like that was a necessary conversation to have. They beat Wisconsin. Really proud of Matt Rule. Really happy for the Nebraska Cornhuskers to go now to a bowl game for the first time in a long time, ending the longest drought in the Power Four. Really happy for them. I know people don't care about bowl games. I care about bowl games. I feel like Nebraska's players care about bowl games. Nebraska's fans care about bowl games. So want to give them a little love there as well. USC also punched their ticket to bowl eligibility, like I mentioned a moment ago, 19-13 in what was a gutsy 10-point fourth quarter after things were not looking very good right there. Not looking good at all for USC there. As they got to the final period, they were able to flip the script and get things done. Cal goes and survives against Stanford. That was impressive in a big rivalry game out there on the West Coast. So a lot to take. Oh, by the way, in Boise State, they have had a wild season, man. I mean, things are getting tougher and tougher, and this was a gutsy win. You go and play against a Wyoming team that's a handful. Boise now is 10-1, 7-0 in the Mountain West, still in perfect spot. And when you look at that schedule, I know Wyoming's 2-9. I know Wyoming's not good. I get that. But it's a tough place to play. And it's not a place that you can just go in and not have your A game and win. It just doesn't happen. But Ashton Genty, a little banged up at one point in the game. He is now over 2,000 yards this year. We have not seen a lot of backs go over the 2,000-yard mark in recent history, so congrats to him. Really impressive stuff there as well. All right, that's going to do it for us here today. A lot of the other games I still haven't seen, so if I haven't talked about your game, just check in with us tomorrow because I'm going to dive in. We're going to watch a bunch of games, watch a bunch of tape today, and we'll have our 10 takeaway show available for you tomorrow at around 3 o'clock Eastern time. So for all of us here at Always College Football, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed the games, and we hope that you'll check back with us tomorrow for a little deeper dive into what went down in Week 13 of the college football season. For all of us here, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.